Hi, thanks for clicking on this video. My name is Chuck, Yoga with Chuck. What I'm hoping to offer with this video is an overview of yoga, how it's benefited me, and perhaps how it can benefit you. Whether you're an experienced yogi who's been practicing for years or completely brand new, hoping to maybe start a home practice by watching videos like this, or joining in for a class with a live instructor in a gym or a studio, I hope that this video will provide you some information to either perhaps shed a new perspective if you have experience, or maybe help alleviate any concerns or fears you may have about starting a practice and provide you some good foundational tools to begin with. The first thing is the definition of yoga. Oftentimes I find that people limit themselves by strictly looking at yoga as the physical movement, the exercise classes of putting your body into shapes and postures. The reality is that's not even yoga itself. It's a part of yoga that's referred to as the asana practice. Yoga is a larger umbrella that includes a series of tools and skills that help us in our life, help us to care for our mind, our body, and our spirit. And by spirit, I don't necessarily mean something religious. I mean those motivating forces that get us through each day. These categories of yoga are broken down into what are referred to as 8 limbs of yoga. The first is called yamas. Yamas are actually codes of conduct, standards of ethics, of how we treat one another, how we might treat the earth. One way that I use to compare this to put it in a context that people might understand is the yamas are similar to, say, perhaps the 10 Commandments. The next limb of yoga are niyamas. These are self-discipline. These are ways that we treat and care for ourselves. So these 2 categories, these 8 limbs, are about how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. Now, I could do videos and courses and conversations about the different yamas and niyamas, but what I want to do here is just provide an overview, just to let you know that that's out there, that this is part of this practice, and I encourage you to do a little study, to learn a little bit more, to see if that part of yoga can be beneficial to you, because for the holistic experience, they all tie together. The next limb of yoga is the asana practice. Probably a good reason why you're watching this video today is because you want to move your body through postures and shapes. In addition to moving your body through the postures and shapes, what's essential is the next limb of yoga, which is pranayama, which are breathing techniques that you use in different styles of yoga. I'll review with you today probably the most fundamental breath that you would use in a yoga class, Ujjayi breathing. But there are many different styles of breathing that you would do, and it depends on the type of yoga asana practice that you are showing up for. So for example, Kundalini uses a lot of breathing techniques throughout the process, at much more than, say, a Hatha or Vinyasa class might. The next limb of yoga is Pratyahara, which is about sensory deprivation. It's about taking yourself out of the moment to just be fully present with where you are, how you're feeling in your body. And this comes with deeper practice. It's something to work towards. It's also about being in a class and not being distracted by the person next to you, or maybe losing yourself in the music, not letting it be something that takes you away from the practice, but might help bring you to the practice. The next is dharana, which is about finding concentration. So once you remove all of those distractions around you, how can you start to concentrate into one place, one focus point? In the yoga practice, every posture has something called a drishti, which is literally a physical focus point of where you're looking, but the focus could also be on your breath. What do you need to focus on to help you in whatever posture that you're in? Sometimes you're in a style of asana or in a particular posture that might require you to solely bring your attention to your breath. It might solely remind you to bring your focus to that focus point. Say if you're in a balanced posture, looking at that space that isn't going to move might be what helps you the most. So it's bringing your intention and attention to one focus point. And ultimately, that dharana moves into dhyana, which is meditation, where you begin to lose even that focus on that one object, and while remaining conscious, are open to nothing, if that makes any sense. So these are deeper concepts, particularly with the meditation. And the last limb of yoga is samadhi, which is pure bliss, pure consciousness. And that definitely comes with deeper practice, deeper study. But again, for the purposes of this video, I just wanted to give you an overview of the 8 limbs of yoga, maybe broaden your concept of what yoga is, and whet your appetite to perhaps maybe go and learn a little bit more. So with that being said, in this video, we will likely focus primarily on the asana practice and pranayama, so the movement and the breath together. And with deeper practice and incorporating all of these postures and movements into your life, you begin to open up the doors to those other limbs. If you're new to yoga or coming to a yoga class or setting yourself up for your home practice, there are some tools that can be really beneficial. If you're coming to a gym or a yoga studio, more often than not, all of these tools, these props, will be provided for you. If you're setting up for a home practice, you may want to invest in these. And it's never a bad idea to have your own things to bring to a yoga studio or gym as well. So the first essential piece of the puzzle is your yoga mat. So I'm already sitting on one now. I'm recording this from home and not in the most ideal place, not necessarily where I personally practice, because this is on a carpet. So this particular mat would slip a little bit. So this is not an ideal situation. You want to put a mat like on a hardwood floor or a harder surface. If you're going to buy your own yoga mat, you can definitely go to the dollar store. You could go to other places and get a very inexpensive mat. I recommend that if you're going to invest for yourself to begin with, probably in the like $20 to $25 price range is a good starting level mat. Some mats can go upwards into, $100, $150. I actually was interviewed by the Washington Post a couple years ago because they were trying to put a $1,000 yoga mat on the market, and they were interested in my perspective as to whether or not people would be interested in that. I reserve judgment for what people choose to buy for themselves. A $1,000 yoga mat, in my opinion, is not necessary and a great place to start. If you want your own, is a good $25 mat is a good way to begin. Again, if you come to a gym or a studio, more often than not, we'll have one for you. And the rule of etiquette is that usually the studio will provide you with a cloth and a cleaning surface. I recommend that you start the practice off by cleaning your mat, but most importantly, clean it before you leave so it's ready for the next person. That early cleaning of the mat is just more preventive, just to make sure that the mat's been cleaned. The next tool that you might want to have is a brick or a block. So there are 2 types of brick or block. Well, there's more than that, but the 2 main that you'll find are a foam brick, which is a little bit softer. And this is a thinner brick. There's usually a thicker brick as well. Personally, I like the thicker brick because it provides a little bit more stability for how I use it. Right now, I just have the thinner brick to show as an example. And another material that bricks can be made out of is cork, which is really hard and really durable. So these are great if you're working towards more advanced balance postures or stability is something that's of a challenge for you. As you can see, I have both styles in my practice and I use them at different times depending on what I'm doing, how I'm working. So brick is essential. If you go to a yoga class, grab a couple bricks from the studio if you're not bringing your own. A lot of times people perceive these tools as crutches, and they're actually just that. They're tools. They're props that you use to enhance your practice. So there's no shame in using any of these tools. Another prop that you may want to use is what's called a strap. And so you can use this for deeper stretches. Personally, as a teacher, I don't often get into using these in class because usually there's time restraints, and it's hard to, it can sometimes be challenging to cue with these. But once you learn, say if you did actually like a strap workshop or something that really focused on ways that you can use a strap, it can be a really, really powerful tool. So if you have tight hamstrings, getting into some leg stretches using the straps can be really beneficial. It can also help you start to open up maybe for some poses that might be challenging if your shoulders are tight. So a strap is a good tool to have. And again, most gyms or studios may have these available to you, but they're not always necessary. Another great tool to have is a blanket. Generally, you will find that in the practice we use kind of like a Mexican style blanket, and you can use this in a number of ways. Number one, to cover yourself up. So, and the final posture in most yoga classes is a pose called Shavasana, where you come and you lay on your mat. It's nice to kind of cover yourself up with a blanket, but you can also use it in ways to support particular postures. So if sitting cross-legged is something that is challenging for you, sitting on a rolled up blanket, elevating your hips above your knees can start to make this posture a little bit more accessible. It'll feel a little bit better on the lower back. I'm so glad that I just did this right now for myself. So a blanket is a good tool to have in your arsenal for a yoga practice. Now, I grabbed this one. This is totally auxiliary, but I do find in teaching that a lot of people complain of knee pain. A blanket is another great tool to place under your knees if you do find pressure in particular postures that find you on your hands and knees. But you can buy some of these foam knee supports and just place these under the knee. I don't want to necessarily like say the brand name of this, but you can find these type of pads easily in the yoga section of like a sporting goods store or online. And lastly, an awesome prop to get for yourself would be a bolster. I personally like a rectangular bolster. These are great for restorative and gentle classes to help support the body. And you can just use this in your house too, just as, you know, more comfortable seating. So a bolster is a really great investment to have. And also, while most studios and gyms are very, you know, clean and sanitary, the reality is that bolsters are not washed constantly. So if you do use a bolster in a gym or a yoga studio, I recommend bringing your own blanket or your own towel and placing that over the bolster. So again, another good reason why you might just want to get your own bolster and bring it to practice. I know it might seem like a lot to carry, but you can get a bag that will roll up your mat, that will generally have a pocket or two for a brick. Oftentimes you really only need like one brick. And again, the strap is auxiliary, the knee pad's auxiliary. So you could have the bag, bricks, mat, and then carry in your own bolster and your blanket, and be good to roll in a class. So when you show up for a yoga class or you set yourself up, your mat is rolled, roll it out on the floor, set your props up around you. I always recommend that people, if space allows, depending on where you're practicing, to do a check, a wingspan check. So when you're laying on the floor, take your arms out to the side, take them up overhead, and just make sure that you've got that space between you and your neighbor, so that if you get into any movements that might be a little bit broader or bigger, you've got the space and you don't have to navigate it as you're going through the class. The way that I structure classes usually flows from the different ways that you can position your body. So generally, I start laying on your back in a posture called Shavasana. Although technically Shavasana comes at the end of the practice, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. So another thing in terms of the definition of yoga is that people think that you just show up to a yoga class, which we now know is an asana class, and it's one size fits all. And the reality is there's many different styles of yoga, and particularly as it's become more modernized, people are fusing in different elements of fitness or movement or just things that they're passionate about. So For example, I teach 3 different styles of yoga classes, and each one is very, very different. And I chose those 3 different styles personally so that someone who wanted to study exclusively with me would have a well-rounded practice. Because what we do in this asana practice as part of the 8 limbs of yoga is we show up on our mat to assess where we are, to get in touch with ourselves. And so we choose a teacher or a style of practice on a particular day that will allow us to make that assessment. So it's kind of like taking your car to the dealership and they plug it into the diagnostics machine. That's what you're doing when you pick a particular yoga class. You're plugging into the diagnostics machine to see how you are. So you might even show up to a class and you might not vibe or you might not like that teacher, but that's going to give you a diagnosis in yourself. Like, how did you respond to that? Did you still stay open? Did you recognize, like, okay, like, I know I don't like this person, but I have an hour with them and I'm going to make the most of it. So that might be one diagnostic, one thing that comes up for you during the yoga practice. So in my experience, it's always a little heartbreaking when I talk to someone and I say, oh, have you ever tried yoga, just because it's the easy way to communicate it rather than say, have you ever tried the asana practice? But have you ever tried yoga? And they say, oh yeah, I did it and it wasn't for me. And then I probe a little bit deeper, and oftentimes it will be someone who's really looking for a vigorous physical practice, start off with a super gentle breathing yoga class, and they kind of, that diagnostics was like, I don't like this, it's hard for me to sit still, and they kind of like ran away from it. Or someone picked, say, a heated power vinyasa class and they were a senior citizen with a ton of injuries, and that maybe wasn't the best asana practice for them to be exposed to or even have within their practice. So there's all different styles of practice, all different ways of approaching it. And again, as it's kind of been modernized, people fuse in different things. I teach a class where I fuse in fitness. Some people might fuse in Tai Chi. Some people might fuse in dance or anything that maybe they're passionate about. To me, the reason why there's space for so many yoga teachers out there is because we develop a passion for it and we want to be able to share it in ways that it has benefited us and bring our own unique story to it. And that's why I think there's room for so many different teachers. So maybe you're already ready to click this video off and I'm not a teacher for you. Don't give up on yoga. Know that there could be somebody that really resonates with you or a style that really resonates with you. Hopefully you go with different teachers and different styles and you take all these opportunities to diagnose how you are in your mind, body, and spirit, and use that to get intel to live your life as best as possible. So as I was mentioning, you move through the class in different positions. And so I personally, and everyone's different, and my sequence might change, generally would have you start laying on your back. So you would make yourself as comfortable as possible. And we'll start to move a little bit now. So if you have your setup, we're good to roll. And it'll be conversation and movement. For this video and other videos, we'll have more movement for sure. But this one is kind of an introductory to yoga video, conversation, workshopping, foundations, and basics. So laying on your back, you may make yourself comfortable. I see some people do it with the bolster. I think that brings your neck up too much and it doesn't look particularly comfortable for me. But if you wanted to set up using your bolster, go for it. This is about your comfort. Generally for me, I like to have the rolled up blanket under my head. And if you can extend your legs, that's great. If it's really difficult on your lower back, you can always start off by bending the knees and having the soles of the feet on the floor. And what you want to do is really make sure that your neck is long, your spine is long, so that your shoulders are on the mat. And rest the palms down by the side of the waist with the palms facing up. Now, with the legs extended, you want to bring them out a little bit to the edge of the mat and just let the ankles flop to the side. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll lift my head and shoulders, roll my shoulders back, so much so that the palms face up towards the sky. This is how I like to begin most of my classes, but this is also the final posture in most people's classes, Shavasana, corpse pose. So those are some basic tips on the postures that will have you laying on your back. The next level of setting up postures would probably be a seated pose. And so again, if you can sit cross-legged in what's called Sukhasana, this is great. If this is something you're working towards, you could sit again on the blanket. You could also sit on the break. You can see how that lengthens my spine. And honestly, even if you can sit comfortably in Sukhasana, it feels really good and it feels really supportive to elevate the hips above the knees a little bit. So the brick is a little bit more than what I would be looking for, but I'm kind of feeling that I like the blanket right now. So when we come into this seated pose, generally what I'll encourage you to do is to breathe in and find a perfect posture. So spine is super strong. It's as if someone has a string at the crown of the head. To breathe into that, and then on your exhale, just be you. So maybe the back rounds a little bit and the shoulders relax a little bit. And to me, this is the perfect posture. And so now let's talk a little bit about pranayama, about breathing. And let me guide you through what I think is the most fundamental breath to know and utilize into a yoga practice, Ujjayi breathing. Some of the benefits of Ujjayi breathing are that it warms the body from the inside out. So it kind of creates your own self-regulated warm yoga class. The benefits of that, it will help to loosen the muscles in a safe way so that you minimize the risk of injury. It also helps bring you focus because you're focusing on that breathing. You can also focus in a little bit on the hearing of the breath, and that kind of becomes like a home base to keep you centered and grounded, particularly as you start to move towards that deeper practice where you incorporate the 8 limbs of yoga, the one that I talked about finding that concentration, that focus point. So let's break down the Ujjayi breathing. So the way that I like to teach it is to have you breathe in through the nose, hold it at the top, and then let it go like you're fogging up a mirror. So the thing that you want to be really mindful here is, are you actually creating a breath that would fog up a mirror, that if you were doing a science project with a little kid, that they could go and write their name in the steam that comes up on the mirror? Or are you doing more of a blowing out of the birthday candles? If you're blowing out the birthday candles, you're taking it from the chest, and it's more of a fight or flight breath, as opposed to diaphragmatic breathing from the belly. So by creating that sensation of fogging up the mirror, you're going to begin to really make sure that the breath is all centered from the diaphragm. So let's do that again. We're going to breathe in through the nose, hold it at the top, and fog up the mirror. Awesome, let's do that again. Now that you've got that down, we're gonna do it again, but this time when you go to fog up the mirror, do it with your mouth closed. Same sensation though in the back of the throat. So breathe in. So you start to make this slight restriction at the back of the throat. Some people refer to this as a Darth Vader, like from Star Wars breath, or an ocean wave breath. So you get that sensation, that hearing of that breath. Now, breathing in and out through the nose for an hour or so through a asana practice class will leave you feeling a little bit lightheaded, a little bit dizzy. So I always recommend that you judiciously use some exhales through the mouth periodically. And a sigh is a really awesome tool. The reason why a sigh is an awesome tool is that particularly if we go into a posture that your body's not used to going into, your body is going to tighten or tense up and be like, whoa, what are you doing? I'm going to try and protect you. Are you sure you mean to go this way? When you sigh, when you exhale through the mouth, it temporarily distracts the central nervous system. So your focus goes to that breath and your body might deeply release into the posture because you're giving up that layer of protection that's unnecessary. So it's kind of like a hey, oh, hey, look over there. And it's also a reassurance to your body, like, it's okay, I want to go into this posture. So definitely a super, super vital tool. Don't be, I understand that it can be kind of intimidating or embarrassing to maybe let out a sigh. Might seem kind of like unnecessarily dramatic, but it can be a really, really awesome tool, and I highly recommend it. And if you're practicing at home, watching videos like this, then who cares? No, nobody's there to judge you, and I trust me, nobody would be judging you in class. It's totally normal, totally natural, and a part of the class experience. So from a seated posture, you might do some kind of side stretches. And so while you're here looking, I'm sure you probably like wanting to move your body. So let's move through a couple of these. So we'll come to our seated posture. Find that comfortably tall spine and bring your palms together to the chest. And then inhale, breathe in. Look up to the thumbs. Exhale, take your arms out to the side. Inhale, we're going to shift over towards the right and plant your right hand or forearm down. Turn your left palm up and draw a big arch overhead with the left arm. Spiral the left ribs towards the ceiling. Now, you might feel your ear dropping down towards the shoulder. Use your neck muscles. Keep the neck in line with the spine. Now, with the neck in line with the spine, you're still going to have a range of movement to find that focus point that will be most comfortable for you. Gently press into your left glute a little bit. You always want to work from the ground up in a posture. So where is that foundation? Where is the grounding? And every yoga posture has a balance of effort and ease. So the effort here is in pressing in that left glute, spiraling open the left ribs, letting that arm float up towards the ceiling with the breath, and then maybe relax and release a little bit. Awesome. Now inhale, let's reach through those left fingers. Use your breath to come up to center. Exhale, arms to shoulder height. Inhale, reach through the hips over towards the left. Plant your left hand or forearm down. Right arm extends overhead. Spiral the right ribs up towards the ceiling. Keep the neck in line with the spine. A little bit of pressure in the right glute. Breathing with that yogic breath, that ujjayi breathing. Inhale, let's reach a little bit with those right fingers. Use the breath to come back to center. And then exhale, we'll come into simple seated twist. So you're going to take your left hand to the right near thigh, or maybe in front of you at the ankle. You're going to take the right hand back behind you, close to the tailbone. Every inhale is here to support a lengthening of the spine, and every exhale helps to promote you getting a little bit deeper into this twist as you turn to look back over that peeled right shoulder. Great opportunity to use one of those sighs. You want to think about wringing out your torso. So it's kind of like a wet towel. One wring of that towel is not going to get all the water out. So every subsequent breath, what can you bring to the posture, even if it's just a little bit? Awesome. Inhale, let's sweep those arms up overhead and now take it over to the left. Now, again, you could have the hand in front of the ankles. If you took the right hand to the knee or the thigh, try turning the right palm out and bringing the back of the wrist to the leg. Pulling that close to the body might deepen the stretch a little bit here. Now, if I was able to come and give you a physical adjustment right now, on the inhale, I'd be sliding my hand up your spine. And then on the exhale from behind you, I'd be drawing back that shoulder. So see if maybe you can replicate that sensation for yourself. Awesome. Inhale, we'll sweep those arms up overhead. And exhale, bring the hands to the chest. Some other postures that you might do in a seated position are forward folds. And for guys in particular, having a little bit of elevation can be really supportive, or if you're tight in the hamstrings, by lifting the hips up can help you get further forward to touch your toes. So don't be shy about utilizing the tools, whether it's a rolled up blanket, a brick. If a forward fold comes into class and that's something that's challenging for you and you want to get a little bit deeper, elevate the hips above the knees. That helps. Another thing with forward folds is you can have your hands at the thighs, at the legs. You can even have the spine straight. And that's another variation for a forward fold. So even if you're not ready to touch your toes or that's something that you're working towards, there are options and there are variations. It's yoga practice, not yoga perfect. If you could do everything in the beginning, you wouldn't want to continue with this practice. And for those that say, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, that's why we do it. We do it to get flexible. That's like saying, one of the things I love to say is, it's like saying, I'm so hungry, I'm not going to eat, or I'm so dirty, I'm not going to take a shower. We do the yoga we do the asana practice to bring flexibility to the body, but also flexibility to the mind as well, in the way that we live our life. And so you begin to learn that when you start to make the deeper connections between the physical practice and those 8 limbs that I told you about in the beginning. Now, the next foundation that a lot of postures are based on are tabletop, quadruped, whatever you want to refer to it as. Now, this is on your hands and knees. So again, if the pressure on your knees is too much, a couple options. If you can flatten your feet and you can apply a little bit of pressure to the tops of the feet, that might alleviate some of the pressure off the knees. You could do a thin layer of the blanket under the knees, or you can use this tool. So if you've got like one bum knee, then this might be a really good tool to use. So for the tabletop position, it's just like a table. Your limbs are like the limbs of a table. So I'll see this a lot. I'll see knees super close together and hands way out. Like that would not be a very stable table. So you want your knees about hips distance apart. And then you want your wrists under the shoulders in line with the knees. So can you draw a line from your wrist to your knees? That's something to look at. Now, more often than not, you're going to come in and you're going to you're going to jack all of your weight into your wrists. So I think it's important to be mindful about how you're distributing the weight in the hands. So I like to spread the fingers, press the balls of the hands under the knuckles, then the fingers, then the wrists into the mat, and let this be my tabletop. Now, one movement that you can do here that will break down, just so we have some movement in this video, or a little bit more movement in this video, is cat and cow. So on the inhale, you're going to lift your tailbone and then shine your heart towards the front of the room. Think about screwing in your elbows. You might feel that engage your scapulas a little bit. Now, keep the neck in line with the spine. So generally, in a posture like this, you're probably looking towards the front end of your mat. So with the butt lifted, chest lifted, breathing in, this is called cow posture. And on the exhale, you're going to round your back. So now you flow with your breath here. So on the inhale, you're going to extend the spine, engage the shoulders. Exhale, you're going to flex the spine. So this is about the extension and the flexion of the spine. So continue on with your own breath. Now when you round that back, think about the visual of a Halloween cat. Think about really pushing the mat away. And lastly, in that cat posture, think about drawing your belly button to the spine. So engaging your abdominal muscles through the exhale. So inhale, lengthen the spine, get into the shoulders. Lower back, exhale, flex the spine, engage the core. Awesome. We'll come to a neutral table, and now I'll take you into a pose that you'll probably find yourself in a lot of yoga classes, which is called downward facing dog. So you want to walk your hands slightly further forward from the tabletop, but then take the time to make sure that you've evenly distributed the weight into the hands. You want to tuck your toes here and then lift your knees and then push your butt to the wall behind you. Now, generally, you've got to feel this out a little bit. So for me, my ways that I feel out my dog are, number one, to bend my knees.
If my belly doesn't touch my thighs, that's clue to walk my feet forward a little bit. Then I look at my feet. Are my heels turned in? Are they turned way out? You want them to pretty much be in line with the edge of the mat. So not at the edge of the mat, but in line with. Then you kind of want to warm it up, particularly on the first one. So maybe you pedal it out. Spread those fingers wide. And then press the heels towards the mat. Now your heels may never get there. Think about bringing your lower ribs towards your hips. Reach your nose towards your toes. And then lift the hips a little higher. Feel that lengthening of the back. Now, believe it or not, downward facing dog is a resting pose. So as you begin to learn it, it may seem really challenging. It might seem like a lot of upper body strength. It is a balance between front and back. Use the breath. And then we'll start to walk the hands back. Slowly roll on up, vertebrae by vertebrae. Chin off the chest will be the last thing as you roll up. So, hopefully I'm still in this frame. So, standing postures might be, is one of the last setups for a number of postures and poses is standing. And so what I want to review to do today, I'm just going to flip this camera up just a little bit. I'm shooting this in one take. Is mountain pose, Tadasana. So a good way that I like to teach Tadasana is having you utilize a brick. So if you've got one, great. If not, try to imagine that you have one. And what you want to do is you want to take that brick in between the thighs and squeeze the thighs together. Now, you're likely going to feel your glutes firm. You're going to start to feel your pelvis come forward a little bit, which in turn will lengthen the tailbone. Then roll your shoulders back, so much so that the palms face forward. And then flex your thumbs back towards your pinkies. Now squeeze that brick in. And start to connect to that Ujjayi breathing, that breath that I showed you, where you're breathing in through the nose. And then fogging up the mirror, but with the mouth closed. So this is a strong, powerful, grounding, foundational pose. This is pretty much the foundation of all the standing poses, feeling this connection. A lot of times, what I see, particularly with people who haven't studied deeply or haven't been shown the nuance of mountain pose, is come to mountain pose and they're just hanging out. They're just standing there. When in fact, it is a super strong, engaged, grounded posture. By that sensation of squeezing the brick actually connects to something called the one of the bandhas. Bandhas are energy centers throughout the body that you constrict throughout the yoga practice. Again, it comes with practice and deeper study. That particular bandha that we're connecting to is called Mula Bandha, the root lock. So for women, it's squeezing the Kegel muscle, and for men, it's the perineum. So it's that kind of like that connection, that squeezing of the bathroom muscles. So you can hang out in Tadasana, mountain pose, fire up that Ujjayi breath and really focus on it for like a minute or two. I've done this in classes and workshops, and you can be dripping with sweat because it can be that powerful to engage and connect that way. So some of the other standing poses that are pretty standard in most yoga classes, we can review now as well, and some of the things to be careful of. In a lot of yoga classes, particularly ones that flow, vinyasa classes, you'll go through something called the sun salutation, which is a series of movements that flow from one to the other. Oftentimes, they are connected by what we refer to as, we'll say vinyasa, although vinyasa is a style of yoga where movement is synchronized to the breath. But an instructor may say, now vinyasa to the floor. So you would go through these standing postures, you would end up kind of coming down to the floor, come through a bit of a push-up into a back bend, because you're always, when you're flowing through a class that isn't just pose after pose after pose, you always, in terms of sequencing, want to do a posture and then do the counter posture after it. And so we're not going to focus today on vinyasing through these standing postures. I'm just going to break them down kind of workshop style, and there's still benefit in coming into them. So the first one would be so warrior one. So coming to the middle of your mat in your standing mountain pose, take your right foot forward. Now, the left foot in warrior one, actually, let's start off a different way. Have both sets of toes pointing forward. We're going to start off with the high lunge. So you can step the right foot forward, or actually come back to your mountain. Again, one take. And step the left foot back and have a little bend in that left knee. Hips are forward, toes are forward, and take the arms up overhead and lift the chest and let that be your gaze. So there's a little drop down in the left knee, arms are extended, chest is lifted. You've got a lunge in the front, knee not tracking over the ankle and the knee tracking more towards the pinky tip. So personally, I love to teach high lunge for a reason I'll go into in a second about warrior one footing. So you can, in most classes, you can vary between this high lunge footing and a warrior one footing. So we're in the high lunge here. Now, take that left heel and take the left foot and bring the heel to the floor. So you'll find that there's just like a 45-degree angle in that foot. So it's very subtle. So if you come from low lunge and just find a way to bring that heel down, that's going to take you to warrior one footing. Warrior one is a hip forward posture, and so where your toes go, your hips go. So if those toes are flared out too far, how is that Boston accent? Flared out too far, you're going to really be pulling that hip out of alignment. And so a reason why a lot of people have moved towards teaching warrior high lunge instead of warrior one is because you usually transition from warrior one to warrior two, and people miss the distinction and they do warrior two. So this is wrong. So this is a warrior two footing. They're doing warrior one in warrior two, and they're pulling their hip way out of the way because warrior one is a forward hipped posture. So again, just to kind of review this, standing posture number one foundation would be high lunge, arms extended, little micro bend in that left knee. Then you might bring the heel down. So there's a little subtle shift to the 45 degrees in the foot. I hope that's in that camera. And that is warrior one. Now the next is warrior two. So you're going to take that back left foot and now turn it so it's sideways. Turn your torso in the direction of the back toes. Now this is a wider stance, so you want to toe heel that foot out. There's all different ways to get to warrior two. Toe heeling it out, you could step into it. Now turn your torso in the direction of the back toes. Check in with that lunge. Again, the knee, a lot of times we want to drop that knee towards the big toe, bring it towards the pinky toe, and then feel the sensation from the legs through the lower ribs. Take the arms up overhead, and then exhale, open your arms like a fencer. Turn to look over your front middle finger. Now you can lift the front toes or the front heel to sink down. So a lot of times what people do in warrior two is a lot of this like lunging forward. It's actually a down. Focus points over the middle finger, shoulders are relaxed, lower ribs lifted, building from the ground up. All right, awesome. So there's more postures that you move to, but let's just balance this out on the other side. So turn so that you're, Let's see if we turn. Does that do it? That's what you said. Yeah. So turn. So now your right foot is in that drop. So just to balance things out, we'll explore high lunge on this side. Then bring that right heel to the floor for warrior one. Feel the distinction. So maybe bring the hands together to the chest, and we want to bring that back foot so it's sideways and wider out. So maybe you do a lift and kind of walk, turn the torso, build from the ground up, drop in, check those points, shoulders relaxed, lower ribs lifted, looking over the middle finger, knee towards the pinky, breathing with practice and control. Inhale through the nose, hold it at the top for a few beats, exhale, that slight restriction, that Darth Vader fogging up the mirror with the mouth closed. Awesome. So we'll come on out of that. So those are 3 of the basic standing postures, and there's a ton of variations that your instructor or I will include for you as we move through them, but those are 3 foundational postures. So high lunge, which can be in place of or in addition to warrior one. So just notice that distinction, toes forward, where your toes go, your hips go, and also warrior two, where you're turning that back foot. Another thing to look for in warrior two is, can you draw a straight line from the front heel to somewhere in the back foot? Now, some people are very like, it's heel to heel, it's heel to arch. To me, it's front heel somewhere to the back foot because everyone's body's different. But this footing in those 3 postures is probably like the number one thing that I am most concerned about in terms of like finding a perfect alignment, because you can really pull your hip out if your toes are not going in the direction that you want your hips to go. So hopefully that makes sense. And so while we're in standing and we're coming to the end of this video, let's just do one more, a balancing posture to kind of wrap things up. So we'll do tree pose. So tree pose, what you want to do is you want to start off with that mountain pose. So just imagine now that you've got that brick and you're squeezing it. Connect to the breath. Feel grounded, because we're going to challenge that grounding by bringing a balance element to it. So now there's no shame in finding a wall at home if you need that support. Part of the yoga practice is recognizing that in life, it's okay to ask for help. Find if you know that balance is something you're working towards or working on. When you come to class, position yourself where you might have that type of support, because more likely than not, your yoga class, unless it's like a gentle or restorative or a yin style class, is going to have some element of balance in it. So we're going to shift the weight over towards your right foot, and you can start up by bringing the left heel to the ankle and toes are tucked, so it's kind of like the kickstand of a bike. So that's a great tree pose right here. Now, another one that you could do would be to shift the weight over towards your right foot. Bring the left knee up. Turn the left knee out, opening through the hip. And then place the sole of that foot above or below the knee. Now, you don't want to place it on the knee, because you're then going to create the sensation of pressing the fleshy part of the foot into the fleshy part of the leg. Simultaneously, if you see when I did that, there became this lengthening through the core, which helps with stability. I like to talk about this as zipping up a tight pair of jeans. That sensation that you might create, that's going to engage your core. It's going to lengthen the tailbone, give you some stability. And you can do a number of arm variations here. You could bring the palms together. You could come into like a cactus goalpost shape. That sometimes feels really good on my shoulders. You can extend the arms up overhead. You could steeple them overhead. What's going to help you find support and balance? Again, find that drishti spot. A good one for tree pose is maybe about 2 feet in front of you on the floor. If wherever you're practicing, there isn't somebody right there.
Another one might be to lift the gaze, look up towards the ceiling, maybe widen the arms, lift the chest. So let's come on out of that. Shake off that standing leg. And then we'll build this on the other side. One side could be different than the other. It often is. Another thing here is to be careful. So this is something I do is let the hip come out. You want to make sure that hip is brought in so that you're engaging that core. So for me, that's something to be super mindful of. So maybe bring that awareness to yourself as well. Awesome. So we'll come on out of that. We'll shake off the standing leg. And before we wrap up, there was one thing that I just brought up that I can quickly talk about is the different styles of yoga. How do you decipher what it is? Number one, read the description. So whether it's online or whether you're going to go to a gym or a studio, read the description and see what they're offering. Call, ask, what is this teacher like? What can I expect from the experience? Some of the general terms that you may hear. Number one would be a hatha flow. And that's most asana practice in the States right now is a derivative of a hatha style. So it's kind of like a blanket terminology for the basic postures, moving through them. The speed may vary in which you move through them. A vinyasa class would take those postures and each movement is synchronized to the breath. So that's a pretty fast moving class that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to an absolute beginner. Go to a slower paced class, learn the foundations, because when you're powering through a vinyasa class too, if you don't know a lot of those subtle nuances like engaging the bandhas or making sure the position of the foot and how it might impact the hip, you could actually hurt yourself. So start foundationally, start a little bit slower, get a little bit more comfortable with being able to quickly adapt and get into the postures in a vinyasa class, which is going to move a little bit quicker, synchronized to the breath. Another term that you might hear is yin yoga. Yin yoga is definitely slower paced. It's about getting into the deeper muscle fascia and tissue. It's a very, very beneficial practice. In a class, you may only do maybe 5 to 10 postures, but you hold them for 3 to 6 minutes. You utilize things like the bricks and the bolsters to set yourself up, and you hang out in those postures. Yin can be a wonderfully restorative posture for athletes, and that leads me to but it's a little bit more active in terms of the muscles, whereas a restorative class is similar in that you set yourself up using bricks and bolsters, but you completely allow your muscles to relax into the posture. And so that's a very broad distinction between yin and restorative. So there are so many different styles of yoga, asana practice. Those are 5 terms that you would probably see most common. So I hope that this intro to yoga is beneficial to you. I hope that you'll come back and do more videos with me as we start to put all of this together and flow through some series of different speeds and styles like the ones I just talked about. So again, thank you so much for your time in watching this video. You can always reach out to me with any questions or reach out to the gym or studio where you work if this is who you're seeing it through. So thank you guys again for your time. Namaste, and I hope to see you in future videos as we take this basic foundational knowledge and start to bring it into a moving asana practice. Have a great day.